What is up, guys? It is the Blue Bloods, and you know it's a big game when I have a special guest. I usually do these solo. We had to go get a special guest for this one. We have number 4 Montana State playing number 5 Eastern Washington this weekend in one of the biggest games in the FCS up to this point in the year. And we had to go out and get Kyler Neal from the Eagles Power Hour podcast, Eastern Washington Insider. So, Kyler, I definitely appreciate you hopping on the show, man.
No, man, thanks for having me. It's probably my fourth podcast of the week. So, it's been a busy week, but I'm always happy to jump on these things and, talk about Eastern Washington or just the FCS in general, actually.
Oh yeah, for sure. Hey, it's always good when your team's so good that you're a busy man when you got a game like this coming up. I wish they would have done what they did with the Montana game and flex this game into a ESPN2 or because that's going to be that good of a game this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that was an awesome opportunity. The only reason why we got to ESPN2 though is because the Big Sky did such a good job with this whole ESPN package deal where we have 2 nationally televised games and they already had us slotted for ESPNU that week. So, I mean, that was just one of those easy things to move to ESPN2 when there was no FBS. Good games, no additional time slots really on ESPN2. I mean, this is an epic game as well. I mean, hopefully it lives up to the hype. But, hey, I'm just happy it's on ESPN at least Plus. Everyone can watch it. It's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we went over some questions, but one just hit me, and I wanted to ask you about this. We've been covering conference realignment a lot. Well, Eastern Washington has been mentioned in the recent days about a potential Mountain West bid, coming in the future. Is that something as an Eastern Washington guy that you would like to see? And two, is there any fire to all the smoke that's surrounding a lot of these FCS schools moving up to the group of 5?
I mean, I grew up an FBS fan. I mean, it is what it is. I grew to love the FCS because my team's there. So obviously, if there was any opportunity to jump to FBS, I would be fully supportive. The thing about Eastern Washington is we just don't have an opportunity. I mean, you'll always hear our name thrown around just because of the product we're putting on the field. But I mean, we don't have the correct amount of sports due to Title IX. We don't have the finances to even jump up. We don't have the facilities. Like, it's just not realistic. But every few years are like, oh, Eastern Washington should jump up to the Mountain West. I'm like, it's just more to it than the product on the field. But the rest of the conference realignment stuff, I mean, if you can afford it, like a Jacksonville State, and you have the facilities, or a Sam Houston, I mean, why not? Why not make that jump? I mean, I get a lot of the people who are true FCS believers and they think bowl games are trash or whatever. Dude, it's not. Everyone wants to be playing the top level of competition. I mean, we can say what we want. We crown real championships. They don't. But come on, man. FBS football's fun. I would do anything to say, yeah, my team's, on the top level. It's not going to happen. But the realignment stuff's just crazy right now.
Yeah, 1,000%. I know right now the Southland's hurting. I mean, real bad with all the teams moving from there, and I'm assuming that it's probably not going to look too good moving forward. So we'll see what happens there. But back to Eastern Washington, man. Through 9 weeks, the number 5 team in the country, a slip up against Weber State is the only blemish on this record. What are your thoughts and takeaways of Eastern Washington season up to this point in the season?
No, man. I'm pretty happy with how the season's gone so far. Like, this is overall a historic season. I mean, most people wouldn't think that because we've been to Frisco twice. We've won a national championship. Normally, you would think, all right, Eastern Washington, they've been to what, 6 semifinals or 5 semifinals in the last 11 years. But we've never been in the FCS and gone 6-0. We've never been in the FCS gone 7-0. I predicted us to at least go 8-0. I thought we were going to beat Weber State in my preseason episode, but I predicted us overall to go 9-2 because we do have a tough road coming up. But overall, like, when I'm running the analytics, I'm running the stats, like, this offensive output is on par, or if not better than 2018, which was a historic balanced year of offense, or, it compares and even rivals the Vernon Adams versus Cooper Cup days. I put 2013, 16, 18, which have been somewhat of our best offensive years. And then I put it to this, and just running the averages, all the numbers, like, it's been insane. This has been a historic season. And overall, we've been getting it done. There's been a couple flukes, not flukes, but, a couple head scratchers every now and then. But like I said, Eastern Washington normally doesn't go undefeated anyway. We drop a game or we drop a few games before we get to the playoffs. So, yeah, it's been fun, though.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, you mentioned the offensive output. I think even people who don't watch FCS that much can point to a name and say that's the guy behind a lot of it, and that's Eric Berrier. I had Sam Herder on here from Hero Sports the other week, and we broke down the Walter Payton race, and I think Eric Berrier, they should just go ahead and give him the trophy because what he's doing this year, I mean, it's where you're looking at him and like, can anyone even touch him with stats? I mean, I got him right here, 30 touchdowns, over 3,300 yards already this season. For you, is Eric Berrier the favorite for the Walter Payton Award? After, I'll have to say, I thought he got snubbed last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been snubbed a little bit, but at the same time, first, before I give all this giant praise to Eric Berrier, Cole Kelly's having another fantastic season. Like, this is one of those things, a few weeks ago, I think it was almost a lock. Eric Berrier, he seemed like no matter what, no one's going to be able to catch up to him. Cole Kelly's catching up to him, right? Cole Kelly's putting up some fantastic numbers at Southeastern Louisiana, and they're going to be pretty comparable. I think the race is a 1-2 race, and I think 3 and 4 are so far behind Eric Berrier and Cole Kelly right now. The difference is, like, Eric Berrier has been playing tougher competition. I even did this whole, because like I said earlier, I love analytics, man. I did this whole Eric Berrier, Cole Kelly whole stats and how they line up with each other. I brought it to like 15 different segments, and it's basically tied. It's 7-7. It's such a close race that the big difference is Cole Kelly's been playing easier defenses. And Cole Kelly's road gets a little easier as the season goes on. Like, they have a tough game against Incarnate Word, but Incarnate Word's not a powerhouse defense, where Eastern Washington plays 3 of the top 3 defenses in the Big Sky back to back to back. So I think you're actually going to see Cole Kelly's stats start to actually pull away from Eric Berrier's a little bit, which, if you're voting for Walter Payton, both dudes, super important for their team. I don't want to say it's just his award or he should be the favorite because of how well Cole Kelly's been playing. But, I mean, overall, I think you got to look a little bit at strength of schedule. And do you think Cole Kelly could do the same things Eric Berrier could against Weber, Montana State, Montana, UC Davis? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come. I mean, because I believe they were only separated by a handful of votes last year too.
Yeah.
And then Berrier, barely squeaked out the FCS Player of the Year award. So I mean, those two guys' names are going to be like etched together in the history of FCS over these past few seasons. The other question, man, there's been a lot of talk about draft stock. A lot of the Power 5 quarterbacks have started to fall to the wayside. We saw Matt Corral not have a great outing last week. Sam Howell hasn't had a great year. Spencer Rattler's not even a starting quarterback in the FBS anymore. What is Eric Berrier's draft stock to you? And 2, how can he improve that throughout the rest of the season and in the offseason with the Senior Bowl and some opportunities, which I'm imagining he will have?
Man, I hope so. I haven't heard anything yet. Like, they are giving invites to the Senior Bowls and like the East-West Shrine game and stuff. I haven't heard of anything yet. I assume he's going to get some invites, though. When you're drafting a quarterback, especially at the FCS level, you're already at an uphill battle. I mean, not everyone has the Carson Wentz, the Trey Lances, but then you get some like shockers like Ben DiNucci. Who would have thought he was going to be drafted out of James Madison? When you're looking at Eric Berrier and the things he's able to do, I mean, no knock to Ben DiNucci. He can't do the stuff that Eric Berrier can do. But at the same time, like Eastern Washington, we've had a plethora of quarterbacks, right? Only Matt Nichols is really, he's had a little opportunity at the NFL level. He played for Dallas for a little bit. But most of our quarterbacks, because of the system we're running, I think they're a better fit for the CFL. I mean, that's no knock. I mean, the field's bigger. You can spread out the field. And then when you're looking at Eric Berrier specifically, his arm strength is insane. I don't think people realize how far he can throw the ball. I mean, there was videos and stuff of him going against our punter as a freshman, and he was, that's how they did their warm-ups, and he's throwing 65, 70 yards as a freshman, and he's only gotten stronger. But also at the same time, like an NFL scout, Eric Berrier, he's not the tallest guy. He also has some weird mechanics, his release is really fast, but it's a different release. He doesn't grip the seams of the ball. I think there's a lot of things when you watch him do that you're like, dang, he is such a better athlete than anyone else he's playing against. But some of the things he does, I don't think it can translate to the NFL because, when he's spinning out of coverage, when he's, shaking people off his legs, can you do that against a Von Miller? Those are some of those things where the NFL, it's just such a faster speed. So maybe that pure athleticism that he has may not translate as well as it does in the FCS. I hope he gets an opportunity because he's a stud. He's a leader. He's such a down-to-earth good guy, and he's so talented. It's just trying to be non-biased as possible and trying to put myself in an NFL scout eyes. When he's already undersized and his mechanics are a little different, that might deter him away. But, I mean, you're seeing the Kyler Murrays of the world. You're seeing all these little guys who are starting to make the change. The NFL is changing. You can't just have a pocket passer anymore unless you're like a freak like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. But the NFL is changing, and we're going to see more of these very small, mobile, athletic guys who still have cannons for arms. So I hope he at least gets an opportunity. I don't know if he'll be drafted, but I think someone will at least pick him up in the free agency, test him out, see how he does. And, maybe he can make a roster, practice squad. But I know if that doesn't happen, he definitely, if he wants, can go to the CFL and torch people.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the only thing going for him is that we're seeing a lot of unconventional quarterbacks make it. You look at some of the mechanics Patrick Mahomes has. You look at, like you said, Kyler Murray and his athleticism. Even like a Lamar Jackson now getting an opportunity, and a Trey Lance. A Trey Lance wasn't just a pure style passer. I mean, he has an arm like Eric Berrier, but he's also a little. He can. He's not just a straight up pocket passer, but then also. Cole Kelly's size really helps them in terms of FCS quarterbacks being drafted. I mean, when you're 6'7", 260, I mean, that's bigger than Von Miller at like quarterback. So
I think a beast.
Yeah, both of those guys are going to be problems. But going to the game this weekend, man, I mean, everyone who has any involvement with FCS is going to be tuned in for this one. For you, though, what are the keys to the game for Eastern Washington? What do you think their game plan should be? What matchups do you like for them? Just kind of break down what you see happening for Eastern Washington in this weekend.
Well, I think I'm always big and keen on, styles make for matchups, right? Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, because we're going to be tested, Montana State has a style in just a matchup that can be really difficult for Eastern Washington, right? They have Afonso, who's an absolute stud. He can keep Eric Berrier off the field. They got the number 3 passing defense in the FCS right now. I mean, like, these are just insane numbers. Weber State had the number 3 last week, and now they're about 10 because of what Eric Berrier was able to do with them, but that's still a loss. They were able to contain. And this is going to be one of those games where I think turnovers and surprisingly special teams for Eastern Washington, and unfortunately, they lost us really the Weber State game. 3 fake punts, an extra point missed that could have sent it into overtime, where Eastern Washington by far had the momentum. I don't think anyone, if it went to overtime, was going to say, oh, Weber has this. I think everyone would have said, oh, how Eastern's playing at the end, there's no way they lose this game. But we struggle kicking the ball against UNLV, Idaho, Weber. For some reason, special teams have just been a detriment to Eastern Washington. But the keys of this game for like both teams, for one, if you're Montana State, you got to have Matt McKay do a little bit more. He's struggled the last few weeks. He's a quarterback for Montana State, but he's had a hell of a season so far. 15 touchdowns, only 1 interception. He's made smart plays. But Eastern Washington is a little bit of an underrated ball hawk defense. They're getting to the ball. They're aggressive. They're fast. Sure, they'll give up yards. It is what it is. But, they are a ball hawk. Whoever has a ball, they're rushing to him real fast. So I think Matt McKay actually has to rely on his arm a little bit more. Afonso, he's going to do his best. He's the best running back in the Big Sky by far. He's going to be able to trot down the field. But Montana State and Eastern Washington has a very good and very underrated third down defense. If Montana State gets into these 3rd and longs, Matt McKay is going to have to do it. I mean, sure, I trust Afonso get in his 6 yards carry, but on 3rd and longs, you're not going to let just Afonso only do all the work. Matt McKay is going to have to put in work. In the last 2 weeks, he's really struggled against Weber State, against Idaho State. So I think that's the key to Montana State. Don't worry about giving up big plays. Eastern Washington's going to have big plays. And I think on the flip side, Eastern Washington, don't worry about giving up big plays. Worry about, a team marching down the field, taking 9 minutes off the clock and keeping Eric Berrier out of a rhythm. I don't care if Afonso goes, in the first half, 3 touchdowns, 80 yards apiece, and the drives are over real quick. Eric Berrier is going to get in a rhythm, and he's probably going to answer. What scares me is if Afonso if we can't stop this run and, every play they're rushing it, or every 3 plays they're rushing it and he's getting 6 yards of carry. So, they're just controlling that line of scrimmage. They're slowing down the tempo. Eastern Washington's tempo is insane. And if Eastern Washington wants to win, we have to play our tempo game. We can't play the tempo of Montana State, who's going to definitely slow it down. I mean, that's kind of my keys to the game. And then Eastern Washington, you just got to play your game. Run your tempo. If some drives, the passing game is not going to work because Montana State is such an elite, passing defense. But you're still going to give it to them. Let your studs do what they do. I think Eastern Washington has 4 of the top 12 receivers in the Big Sky. Like, they're a mismatch for everyone. Eric Berrier is going to find time. Just give him a little bit of cover. Have Dennis Merritt, run, and then also use him as a flex. He can kind of do everything. He's kind of like the Sproles of the FCS right now. But yeah, run your tempo, and who cares if you have to punt a few times? Continue to run your tempo and don't alter the game plan, but capitalize on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, and also for me this weekend, it's going to be interesting to see if Eric Berry can really establish his rhythm and get comfortable. I went back and watched the Weber State game as I was preparing for this preview. He early in the game, he didn't look comfortable. This was the first game, I believe, he completed less than 60% of his passes, and he only completed 48% of them. And it really just seemed to get the offense out of rhythm early. And I feel like if Montana State can get Berry out of rhythm, they're going to have a great chance to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, watching even the first half of that game, for one, there were so many uncharacteristic fumbles that Eastern Washington never has. Even they were fumbling when no one was touching them. Those weren't Weber caused for the most part. Those were mental mistakes, and I don't know what it was. But yeah, the beginning of the game, I mean, this was the first time I said it on my podcast, Eric Berrier looked off. He found his rhythm. He got his drives. He still stormed back when we needed to, down 14 with 6 minutes left. He became Eric Berrier. But those first, few plays, few first drives, he was missing even wide open guys. The accuracy was off. I don't know what it was. It could even be that potential we didn't think we could be beat type of mentality. It seems like every time Eastern went to Frisco the next year, they came in real hot. They returned a lot of athletes, missed the playoffs. I don't know if there is that mentality. I don't want to overspeak because I'm not in the locker room. But, after how we've been playing and all of the praise people have been given, maybe it was one of those games where just we didn't think we could be beat. We were on this high horse, and sometimes it's nice to get knocked off your high horse and, not peak too late in the season, or, too early in the season. I think you got to play with fire, and I didn't see a lot of intensity and fire in the first really quarter of that game, even though Eastern, jumped out to a quick lead. But a lot of missed throws, a lot of missed those fumbles were horrible. Luckily, we got half of them back, but it was just a weird game to watch. And I think I agree with all of your assessment.
Yeah, and I was asked by a subscriber, and I thought it was a good point. I agree with them. Was this loss actually possibly a wake up call for Eastern Washington moving forward? Because I don't think you're going to see that offense sleepwalk into this week like you potentially saw last week. I mean, I really feel like that Weber State loss, like you said, kind of brought that team back to earth and was like, okay, we could be beaten. This is the Big Sky. We don't have cupcakes week in and week out. We have to actually play our game. So I'm interested to see, the culture of that locker room and how they respond. But on top of that, man, the next thing, who are some players to watch on both sides? If I told you got to break this game down into 4 or 5 players who are going to have the biggest impact, who are you watching this weekend?
Yeah, I'll start on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know how many games you've watched of Eastern Washington this year, but Jack Sendelbach, he is an absolute beast. He's everywhere. Sure, he doesn't have the gaudy stats of some of these other Big Sky players from Montana or even Fahed. I always butcher his name, but that beast from Idaho.
Yeah,
we don't get some of those gaudy numbers. But Jack Sendelbach has been an absolute nightmare. He's everywhere. You can't avoid him. He's our middle linebacker, but he's everywhere on the field. He's not going to get a lot of sacks because we play a lot of cover. That's somewhat why we give up a good amount of rushing yards, right? But I think he is definitely a player to watch, and he's an impact player on our defensive side. And then in the secondary completely, Kalen Kreiner, he's been a monster. We like to see what these seniors are doing. When he's not in the game, you can kind of you can kind of feel that something's going to go wrong. I think those are like my two defensive guys that we need to definitely look out for, and they are game changers. Again, Eastern Washington doesn't have they're not known for the defense, but those guys are game changers, and they're aggressive, they're fast, they get to the ball. I think they're super underrated. And then, going to the offensive side of the ball, I mean, who do we start with?
I mean, exactly. You just picked the whole wide receiving core and Eric Berrier.
I mean, in terms, I'll just say the whole wide receiving core, right? And then I'll just mention all the names. I mean, it's nice having, Limu Jones back. He's 6'5", 225. I think he's a nightmare matchup for anyone in the Big Sky. He's very fast. He's very athletic. And then, of course, you have Andrew Boston. He's been our go-to forever. He's going to be that one guy who you're just like, all right, I know he's going to get his 80 yards and a touchdown. Where Limu Jones, you're like, guess what? You need to cover him because he's going to break out for 80 yards right up the middle, and you're not going to out-jump him. These little DBs and little corners, you're not going to be able to out-jump him. And then, you have another beast, Efton Chisholm III. He's a very promising freshman. What does he have? 600 yards already? And then Freddie Roberson. I mean, the whole wide receiving core, pair them up with anyone in the Big Sky. I think they're a little bit of a mismatch. But one of the unsung heroes of the year, and it's because of how versatile he is, Dennis Merritt, who's really had a tough road with injuries his whole career. And, now it's awesome seeing a healthy Dennis Merritt getting his opportunity. He was sitting behind a Sam McPherson. He was sitting behind all these Tamarick Pierces. And now he's getting this opportunity, and he's not taking it for granted. He's 600, almost 700 rushing yards. But the crazy thing is, people just only look at the rushing stats and think, oh, he's not that good compared to, an Afonso. We don't use him like an Afonso. He's also receiving 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's got 16 touchdowns on the season. That's one more touchdown than the quarterback, Matt McKay. He has 13 on the ground, 3 receiving. I mean, he's one of those backs where, sure, he's rushing really well average too. I think it's over 5 yards a touch. But he's one of those guys where you need to watch out because we run a lot of RPOs. He could swing. He could go and, do a quick chop block, and then he's gone. And you don't know what happens, or a screen. I mean, he's one of the unsung heroes of this offense, and he's not just getting his touchdowns at the 1 yard line like some people are mentioning. He's so versatile. We're able to use him anywhere. And then, Eric Berry, I don't know what else to say about him. I mean, every single person's going to say everything about Eric Berrier. He's going to go down as arguably the greatest quarterback in Big Sky history and one of the greatest in the FCS.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already got to put him right there at the top of both of those things. So, for the predictions, first off, before you give me your prediction, what does a loss mean for either one of these teams, and what does a win do for either of these teams in a matchup of this magnitude in the Big Sky?
Well, for Montana State, it's going to be, for both teams, it's super important, right? For one, you have, just for the Big Sky title, Sacramento State right now, who has probably the easiest road in the Big Sky. They do have one tough team left in UC Davis, and then they kind of got Montana when Montana was battled with all these injuries. Now, they've done what they're supposed to do. They're winning. But overall, they are arguably going to go 8-0 in the Big Sky. So for Montana State, super important if you get this win, because you would have the overall record. You would have the better resume. You would have everything to get the auto bid out of Sac State. And if Montana State wins out, you're looking at a potential top 3 seed. I mean, if you win out the season and you beat Eastern Washington, I don't think anyone's going to take Montana over Montana State right now, how they're both playing, especially if Montana State beats Eastern. But then, you're looking at resumes. You're looking at all this, and it looks like North Dakota State and Sam Houston may be a lock for the top 2. But if Montana State has 10 wins, 0 losses versus the FCS. Sam Houston has 10 wins, 0 losses versus the FCS. Montana State has 3 ranked wins? I mean, the resume gets them at least an argument for a top 2 seed to get home field advantage. And, you want home field advantage in the playoffs, especially if you're in Montana in the December. Who wants to go to Bozeman or Missoula or Cheney or South Dakota State, in Brookings, any of these southern places, especially if you're a southern team, or northern places, especially if you're a southern team. And then, so I think it's huge for Montana State, and it also gets the monkeys off their back. I don't know if you've followed this little game rivalry. Montana State's, I think, only won 4 games in the last 20 or something against Eastern Washington. Like they just haven't been able to beat Eastern Washington or at least beat them consistently. So with fresh new coach Vegan, if they can upset Eastern, I don't even know if it's upset, right? They're ranked number 4 in the nation, but the Vegas odds has it as an upset if Montana State wins. But how huge is that for the program moving forward? You're the best in Montana. You're the best in the Big Sky. Brand new coach. You're getting talent. I mean, it's massive, especially since you already have the facilities. And then you can get potentially home field advantage or at least home field until the semis in Bozeman. I don't see many people beating Montana State and Bozeman. So that's huge. And then for Eastern Washington, man, right now that missed extra point, if Eastern Washington won out, I think they were a lock for a top 2 seed. Now it doesn't look like, they're going to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs unless some type of upset happens in the playoffs. So, if we went out and go 10-1 overall with an FBS win, I think that's good enough for a top 4 seed. And I'll take my odds of, having a top 4 seed, people coming to Cheney, and then hopefully maybe one of those other teams gets upset on the road and then they have to come back to Cheney in the semis, like what's happened in 2018, what happened in 2010. I'll take those odds. But yeah, this game's super important, and it kind of dictates the Big Sky championship race. I mean, if Eastern wins, most likely Sac State is still going to get the auto bid. But in terms of seeding, I think Eastern's above Sac State, right? Just with the resume, and they'd have more wins because Sac State also lost to Northern Iowa in the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is such an important game and such a fun game. We don't really get a lot of 4 versus 5s in the Big Sky. At least, you'll always get a couple teams ranked in the top 5, but one of them will lose before they play each other. And this is the second game Eastern Washington's had in the top 5. I think it was like number 5 versus number 3 when we played Montana or something close to like that. Maybe it was 6 versus 3. But yeah, man, this is such a fun game, and it's fun to be a part of.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, listen, if there's going to be anybody coming out of the Big Sky who's going to be tested, is going to be Eastern Washington. I mean, they've had a brutal road, and so is Montana. Montana State, you got to give them props too for doing what they've done this season. But so, man, game prediction: who do you got winning? What's your early score prediction? I know we're recording this on Wednesday, so things could change. But right now, what's your gut feeling that's going to go down on Saturday?
Well, in my preseason Eagles Power episode, soft plug, I predicted Eastern Washington to go 3-1 or 4-1 at home overall, right? I thought the home slate was just too tough to win against Montana State, Weber State altogether. Didn't think we were going to win all of them. I thought we would drop one, even though Eastern Washington's home field record is amazing ever since they installed the red turf, right? We dropped one. I think it's over. But this is definitely a nightmare matchup. This is Montana has all the right tools to beat Eastern Washington. Montana State does. So this is a nightmare matchup, but I just don't see Eastern Washington dropping 2 on the red, especially in a row. I get there was a bye week for both teams. So I'm going to go Eastern Washington 34, Montana State 27.
Oh, I like that one. I like that one. Yeah, I mean, I came in with mine, so we're a little bit similar. I said the same thing, man. I just listen. When there's 2 teams that are ranked this high that have this many similarities and are this evenly matched, I always just my gut says go with who has the better quarterback, and I don't think there's any question who has the better quarterback in this matchup. And like you mentioned, the fact that if they lose 2 in a row in the red turf, you got to take it out. We got to change the color. We got to put black turf in. Something's got to change. We can't lose 2 on the red turf. And I'm just putting my money on Eric Berry. I can't see him playing like he did last week. If he has another performance like he did last week, I will be completely shocked. I had Eastern Washington 38, Montana State 30 this weekend on the red turf. And so that was my prediction. But man, I appreciate you coming on the show. Shout out to the FCS Reddit, Twitter. They put all the FCS podcasts in there, and that's how I found you guys. So shout out to them for that. But where can people find your show? Where can they listen? Plug your show, Twitter, everything, man. This time is yours.
Yeah, man. So anyone who's not really familiar with me, so you can find me in multiple different things, multiple podcasts, right? So I'm one of the people who's in charge of the FCS Fans Nation page on Facebook. We have a pretty solid podcast there. We have the FCS Fans Nation Podcast Network on YouTube. So, I mean, if you want content, we have, a South Dakota State podcast. We got a Sun podcast. We got, our podcast, a couple different shows that are affiliated with our actual administration team. Then you can find me on Twitter if you just want to smack talk, right? Kyler EPH. You can find my podcast anywhere you download, podcasts. It's Eagles Power Hour. I'm just strictly talking about Eastern Washington and making horrible takes like always. But I mean, those are where you can find me. FCS Fans Nation, anywhere online, Eagles Power Hour, or Twitter, Kyler EPH, if you just want to smack talk.
Oh man, hey, he said if y'all want the smoke, y'all know
Let's
where to
get
find
it.
them. There's
Let's
no
get it.
excuse now. There's no excuse now. But guys, definitely go check out all the FCS podcasts. Listen, I do all levels, so I can only give y'all so many a week. If you need more FCS content, listen, this guy to my right or my left, my right, he does it bigger than I do. I promise. This guy will get you the FCS content. So go check out all the shows on that network, and of course the Eagles Power Hour podcast, man. Great show. But Kyler, definitely going to have you back on. Listen, when it comes playoff time, your phone's going to be ringing. I'm going to be calling you for all the Eastern Washington games. But, man, I appreciate you. Guys, we'll be back later this week with some more previews. Y'all know Fridays are SWAC preview days, so we got some great previews coming later. But for right now, man, for Kyler, myself, and the Blue Bloods, we are out for right now.